Thanks for joining me on another episode of the Field Quiver Outdoors podcast. I'm your host, Jody Thibodeau, and it's my goal with this and every other episode to help you fill your quiver with God and the great outdoors. Now, if you haven't already, make sure that you're following the show and turn on notifications so that you'll get an alert whenever new content drops. And also, if you haven't yet, make sure you give us a good rating and review wherever you're listening or watching the show. That'll help us with these algorithms. I have no idea how they work, but the more ratings and reviews that you have, word on the street is it will make the show pop up in more people's searches and feeds for their possible interest. And there's a few other ways I'd like to ask you, if you don't mind, to support the show. The first is through prayer. Just pray for the show, pray for myself. Another way that you can support the show that it costs you absolutely nothing and take just a matter of a few seconds is go ahead and recommend us to some friends that you think might be interested in the content as well. Now, if you're looking to support the show in some other ways, you can do that by buying swag from fieldquiveroutdoors.com. The podcast is a ministry of Field Quiver Outdoors. And if you go to the website in the store, you'll notice there's a place for donations. The donations, any donations made, will be designated specifically at this moment in time for the show. Now, in the future, there may be other options for ministry opportunities that the donations could be applied to, but as of now, it is just the show and being able to give out at no cost at different events the Gospel Fly trading card tracks. All right, so now that I've got my shameless plug out of the way, let's go ahead and move into this episode's On My Radar. Now, it's been a while since the last episode dropped. I decided to take a break over the holidays from recording any new content. And obviously, over the course of a month, a lot has happened. But there are just 5 things that I want to mention briefly. You can go to links at the bottom of this page in the show notes section and read more about these different things. But first off, just to mention the Christmas bird count. If you'll recall, I mentioned it in, I believe it was actually the last episode that dropped, but they now have the preliminary results out, that initial data. They're just waiting on it to be confirmed. But as of now, the current statistics for the Christmas bird count is that there were 1,089 counts, which ended in 15,792,593 birds being counted. Again, you can go to the link in the show notes and keep checking back periodically, and eventually, whenever that data is included with the historic data, that's effectively confirmation that it has all of the information has been reviewed and confirmed by regional editors. Now, up next is another bird count that's coming up in February. It will be February 16th through 19th, and it is being organized by the Audubon Society, Birds Canada, and the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. It's called the Great Backyard Bird Count. And over those 4 days, what they're asking is folks to just take at least 15 minutes on one or more of those 4 days, go outside, see what all birds you can see, identify, and document through either the eBird website, the eBird app, or the Merlin Bird ID app. Now, once you input your data on any of those days, it will automatically go into the count. I'm not sure how they will be releasing the statistics, but again, just go to the link in the show notes and you can find out as much information about that event as you would like. Also, right after the last episode dropped, Colorado released 5 more wolves, bringing the total reintroduction count to 10. Now, these are the last of the wolves that they will be able to get from Oregon, unless Oregon changes the agreement or they come into a new agreement, which puts Colorado in a little bit of a bind based on everything I've been reading, because their goal is to have reintroduced 15 wolves by mid-March, but they don't have another state that's willing to cooperate with them for them to obtain the 5 more wolves they need to get them to the 15. If you want information about the 10 wolves that have been released thus far, again, link in the show notes. You can find out the sexes of the wolves, the ages of the wolves, their official names, and I believe it had their weights and a few other data sets for each of the 10 that they've already reintroduced. Kids in Parks, if you're not familiar, definitely go to the website and the link and look into it. It is an amazing program. I enjoy doing their different activities with my kids. I'm sure if you have kids, they'll enjoy it as well. And even adults going through their pamphlets on their different trails spread across the country are fun and informative. But the thing with them is they just announced their year-end stat of having introduced 25 new trails in 2023. And this actually includes the first angling trail, which I believe was in North Carolina. And again, if you click on the link, you can look at the 25 specific trails, and it will tell you what the different activities for each trail that were introduced are. And the last item that I want to mention that's come across my radar is actually something that my guest and I talked about during our conversation, and that is the cicada brood hatches that are going to be happening here in just a couple of months. Now, the last cicada brood hatch was Brood 10, which was a couple of years ago. And that's actually what we talked about, was a fly that Matt Zudweg, who is the guest on today's episode, designed around that time frame, and it's still available on his website. So if you live in one of the areas that's going to be affected by the hatches this year, check out his website. It's boneyardflygear.com. There's a link in the show notes. If you want to make your own flies that look like these cicadas and have them ready like I'm planning on doing, you can order the wings directly from him, as well as some of the other materials needed to tie those particular flies. And you can go on YouTube, and he has an instructional video as well of how to tie those. But getting back to the cicada hatches and broods themselves, this year is actually very interesting. This is the first year since 1803 that there will be a double brood hatch. That will be Broods 13 and 19. Now, Brood 19 is actually the largest brood geographically in the United States, and that's the one that'll be affecting here where I live in upstate South Carolina. That particular hatch will affect parts of 15 states, and it has been nicknamed the Great Southern Brood. And it's a 13-year hatch. The other hatch is a 17-year hatch, and it is, like I said, it is Brood 13. And it is expected to affect between 4 and 5 states, depending on the emergence. Again, this is the first time there's been 2 hatches in the same year since 1803. And just as a random fact of useless information, your kids won't experience another one. Your grandkids won't experience another one. There's a high probability that your great grandkids won't experience a double brood hatch, just depending on how old you are now. But the next double brood hatch won't be until 2245, if all of the hatches maintain the 13 and 17 years, and there's nothing changes with that. And assuming the Lord doesn't return prior to then. But based on their current schedule, the next double brood hatch is not expected to occur until 2245. So that's something that if you're listening to the show, that's pretty cool, that you get to experience in your lifetime, that the next several generations will not be able to experience. Now, by experience, it is an experience, because these hatches can get up to 90 decibels in volume, which 90 decibels is the equivalent of some lawnmowers and motorcycles. But now that you know what you can be looking forward to as far as annoying noises coming up in a couple of months, let's get to something that won't be quite as annoying, and that's my interview with Mr. Matt Zudweg. Let us know a little bit about who you are and what your claim to fame is.
I don't know if I have any sort of claim to fame. I'm just a lowly fishing guide in Michigan on the Muskegon River. I guide for Feenstra Guide Service or Feenstra Outdoors. And there's 5 of us guides on the team. And man, it's just really good being part of a good group of people. There's four guys and 1 gal, and we just have uh, a lot of fun together. As far as from a business standpoint, we all have similar interests in the way that we like to fish. So our guide service specializes in two-handed stuff. So trout spay, for the trout, and spay casting or spay fishing, if you could call it that, for steelhead. And most of the year, we are guiding for steelhead, although there's about 3 months out of the year I'm guiding for trout and about 3 months for smallmouth bass. But the other 6 months is pretty much steelhead.
Okay.
Mhm.
And as far as, I guess we'll just go ahead and start up with that, with your guiding. How long have you been a guide again?
I've been guiding. This is my 21st year guiding. Now, the first couple years, I was only doing maybe 40 trips a year. At the time, I had a sign business. I was doing a lot of interior decor stuff for restaurants, and I had a year's worth of work ahead of me all the time, and I was really getting burned out on it. And so I started guiding just as a way to get out of my studio and still make some money. It was really just an excuse to be outside rather than in my studio. And I was doing maybe 30, 40 trips a year, so not very much. But then when the economy crashed in 2008, so did my sign business. All the restaurants I did work for went bankrupt, and we were on the verge of bankruptcy ourselves because of that. But the guiding business continued to have a demand. So at that point, I just decided to become full-time fishing guide.
Okay. And that's pretty cool the way you just got into it and ended up making it. I guess that's now your, what you would consider your full-time job,
Yeah,
is the
correct.
guiding.
Yep.
Okay. Uh, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but in addition to the guiding, you also are an artist,
Mhm.
and very good, by the way. So
Thank
that's one claim to fame that you have.
you.
And folks can check out your website and see some of that. A lot of your designs have gone on to t-shirts, onto stickers that they can buy from you. And I'll have a link to your website, which if you want, you can go ahead and share the name of it.
Yeah, it's Boneyard Fly Gear is my website, and basically, I that's become my outlet for art. As somebody who has an artist brain needs to create, and when my sign business collapsed, I still needed that outlet, so I started Boneyard Fly Gear and did some fishing related designs, and made stickers of them and started marketing them through that. And now we have quite a few retailers. A lot of fly shops will be retailers for our stickers and stuff. But we also do t-shirts and I have a lot of my fly products from my original patterns available on the website as well.
Okay. And people can commission you to do art as well. Am I recalling that
That's true.
correctly off your website?
That is true. I do logo design. I do offer logo design and things like that. Although most of my year I'm too busy guiding to put any time into that. So really about the only months that I say yes to projects are January and February. So, right now it's winter. I don't have as much of a guiding schedule, so that way I can get some income during the winter months by doing stuff like that.
Okay. So the bulk of your guiding is March all the way through December.
Correct. Usually,
Okay.
I mean, really, I just finished up last week with my regular scheduled trips, and now I really don't have much on the schedule until early March.
Okay. And I guess the main thing that's probably your claim to fame is a specific fly, the Zudbubbler.
Hmm.
And I've watched your tutorials online, the older one, and then you re-recorded it again last year
Yeah.
with some changes that you'd made that you started doing yourself with it. Tell me about the Zudbubbler.
The Zudbubbler is a fly that it really came about before I started guiding. There was a particular bass bug that I really loved. It was called the gerbubble bug, and it was invented in like the 1940s by a guy named Tom Loving. And I was just enamored with this particular popper. It had a square head. It made a very different sound when it popped than any of the round cylinder head poppers. And so I made a lot of those. And in fact, for any viewers who are watching this, this is kind of what the original looked like. That's an original gerbubble bug, and it's got feathers coming out the side, but it's got the square head in the front, which makes a very different pop. So I was making those not just for fishing, but I was selling those to like antique shops, and I would make it clear this isn't really an antique, but it looks like an antique, just because it's a really old school popper. And I would sort of antique it a little bit. But when I started guiding, to put an hour or two into one of these balsa poppers to have it lost in a tree, or to a pike or something like that wasn't really feasible. So I was walking through Home Depot or something like that one day and saw all of these floor mats for like kids' playrooms and stuff like that. And it was like a light bulb moment for me. So I bought a pack of these foam mats and came home and started cutting the heads out of those. And it made the tying process, 5 minutes versus an hour and a half. And that's kind of how the Zud Bubbler was born.
Okay. And yeah, we're going to talk some more because I have a lot of questions for you about the your balsa bugs that you tie and offer on your website. But we'll get to that here in just a little bit. But as far as the Zud Bubbler, um, you've actually teamed up or they came to you with Hairline. And folks don't have to go to Lowe's or Walmart and buy the foam mat and cut them out themselves. They can go ahead and buy the little squares. I don't know if my camera will focus or not,
Mhm.
but I actually just ordered some from you. I actually got them in the mail yesterday, so I haven't had the opportunity to try and tie them myself.
Uh-huh.
Um, but uh, I mean, they come in packs of what is it? Packs of
There's 6
six.
in a pack, yeah, and there's like
Yeah.
13 different colors that are available. And originally, Hairline approached me just because they were seeing my Instagram feed of me making all of these poppers, and I've had a relationship with Hairline for years, doing design work and stuff like that. And so Marcos at Hairline asked if they could carry the Zudbubbler bodies, and we came to an agreement, and it worked out. And they did for probably 3, maybe 4 years. And then the next greatest popper came along, which was like the double barrel surface seducer. And it's a great
Mhm.
bug too. But they were selling way more of those than the Zud bubblers. So they discontinued the Zud bubblers at that point.
Okay.
So I
So
probably have 50,000 of them in stock at this point, but we
I
do
got you.
sell them through our website, retail and wholesale.
Okay, I got you. Yeah, because I ordered them from your website,
Right.
along with a couple other things that we'll talk about here in a few minutes. But, um, I mean, folks can, if they really want to go through the pain and labor of making their own, they
Hmm.
could buy the mats from
Yep.
Lowe's or Walmart or wherever, or they could go with convenience and just order from you,
Right.
um, which is the route I went. But now, as far as tying the Zudbubbler, I know you've made some changes in your personal preferences of how you tie them, according to the video you recorded last year.
Yep.
Now, for somebody new to fly tying like myself, I've watched the tutorials, both of them probably a half dozen to a dozen times each now. Um, but for folks that haven't watched it yet, let's just kind of, if you don't mind, what all materials does somebody need other than the body itself, uh, as far as
Right.
like
Well,
what
I have a
hook
couple
size,
Zep
hook
bubblers
style?
right here with me. If you can see that, that's the finished bug right there. So
Okay,
basically, for the tail, we have just one marabou feather. It can be any color marabou. You know, sometimes the bass prefer one color over another. I mean, anybody who bass fishes can tell you bass are very color sensitive. So one color could work one day and then not work the next day. But just a marabou feather for the tail. Then we have some rubber legs out back here, and then a schlappen feather for the hackle. Then we have the
okay,
Zudbubbler popper foam head, and then just a couple rubber legs through the side. It's really quite a simple fly. It doesn't take me more than 4 or 5 minutes to tie one, but it makes a very distinct pop with the square head, and it's been a very effective bug. For the hook, my hook is generally a Daiichi or a Core brand hook made by Arex, and it's a number 2461 in a
okay.
size 3/0. But
The it
obviously,
broke
all
a
of
little
this
bit. What was the size again?
it's a 3/0 hook.
A 3/0. Okay,
So it's a pretty big fly, but when we're bass fishing, at least in my boat, we're not hunting for numbers, we're hunting for a big bass.
right. And as a guide, are these flies some that you usually have for clients to use if they want to?
Yeah, generally, most of my bass trips, we're probably throwing a Zudbubbler 80% of the time. And it's really the only popper we ever use in my boat, unless somebody comes with their own like deer hair bugs that they want to use or something like that. But that's really a rare thing. So we're either using a Zudbubbler popper or we're fishing a streamer, one of my streamer patterns just under the surface.
Okay.
So it's all
And
visual regardless of what we're fishing with.
okay. And I know in one of your tutorials, you talk about marking up the body,
Mhm.
just to give it a little bit more color. Now,
Yeah.
have you ever painted or actually put a sealant over the entire body of one of the foam
I
bodies?
have, although it's so not necessary. I mean, all
Right.
my all my balsa bugs are sealed with 30-minute epoxy, but as far as the Zudbubbler goes, you can catch 100 fish. If you tie it right, you can catch 100 bass with one popper, and the foam will get really chewed up, but it'll hold up. It doesn't
Okay.
need any sort of coating.
Okay. Now, is the Zud bubbler and the Gur bubbler, or the Gur bubble bug,
Yep.
are they supposed to emulate a frog? Is that
Generally,
the
yes.
intent? Okay.
Yeah. Although, if you tie it in certain colors, you can imitate like a wounded bait fish, a shad or something like that. I
Okay.
have another pattern that's called the wiggle Zud bubbler. And basically the head is turned around backwards and the hook has a bend in it. So it imitates a wounded shad right on the surface. It's got a really nice wiggle every time you strip the line.
Okay. And kind of the last thing, we'll use this to segue into another thing, another topic, with the legs. There is a leg puller
Yep.
that Hairline also has, that is of your design. Is that correct?
That's correct. So
Hmm.
the leg puller came, after I had tied maybe 500 to 1,000 of these Zudbubblers, using a bodkin to poke the hole through the foam and then coming back with a thread puller. It was just like a 2 or 3 step process and I just had one of those light bulb moments again. Why couldn't you just poke something through there with a hole in it and then put the legs through and then pull it back out? It'd be, one step versus the 2 or 3 steps. And so I got with Marcos at Hairline and told him my idea. And I didn't know at the time, but Marcos is super handy with making tools. So he actually made a couple prototypes, sent them to me. We kind of decided on a design, and Hairline now sells those. And Marcos is the one who makes them.
Okay. Yeah. And how long ago did you come up with that?
Man, that's probably been, I would guess, 10 years ago. For
Okay.
anybody watching the video, this is the tool right here. It's super simple. It's just a needle that has a hole in it. So you can poke it through the body, put the legs through the hole, and then pull it back out the other side.
Okay. Yeah, it looks to me like an oversized needle, because I know
Yeah.
Walmart, you can buy the
Or an
thicker needles, but they're
undersized tire repair kit sort of thing.
yeah, yeah, and, because I actually considered using some of the larger sewing needles, but with some of the bodies, it's just not long enough to push it all the way through,
Right.
put the leg on and pull it back through, but the Zuddy's leg puller solves that problem because it's got enough length to it where it's gonna go through the body of pretty much any foam fly that you're making.
Right. And you can use it on balsa even, or deer hair.
Okay.
It's definitely one of those tools that, you know, everybody else was like, I can't believe I didn't think of that. It's that simple. And somehow I lucked out and thought of it. But
I got you. Now, another fly that's a newer addition to your website. I also bought some of these bodies to try out. The big Bopper hopper.
right.
Tell me how you came up with that, and some recommendations, some tips for again folks new to fly tying that might want to order some of the bodies and make their own.
Yeah, I will have a tutorial video coming out on that fly soon. But basically, 12, 13 some years ago, I was doing a trip to Montana with my friend Derek, and it was hoppers. We were going to be hopper fishing. It was like late August, early September. So I came up with a hopper pattern called the spider hopper, and it just worked amazing out west. And so then I brought it back here. I don't really have hopper fishing on the Muskegon River, but for bass, I tied a bigger version of it, which I called Darth Hopper. It's just a great big, basically a spider or a grasshopper looking pattern. And I do have a tutorial somewhere out there for Darth Hopper. Now, the Big Bopper hopper is a little different. It uses the same body that I used for the Darth hopper, although we switched the dubbing to a dubbing from Fly Tire's Dungeon called Big Bopper Dubbing. So it just seemed kind of fitting to call it the Big Bopper hopper.
Okay. And one other fly that I wanted to talk with you about, and this is actually something that I didn't realize till after I made my order from you, but I'm gonna have to do another order now to get some of the wings for the cicada,
Oh, yeah.
because I did not realize until, like I said, a few days ago, that our hatch for where I'm at here in South Carolina is this year. For I think ours is Brood 19,
Okay.
and it's one of the 13-year
Well, that
hatches.
explains why I'm getting a lot of orders for cicada
Yeah,
wings.
yeah, because it covers 19. I started reading up on it after work yesterday, but didn't get a whole lot of time. But apparently, it covers almost the entire southeast. So
Okay.
I think it's one of the largest broods.
Yeah.
But and there's actually two broods. There's the 13 and
In the
or not the
17.
13, the yeah,
I think it
the
is 13
13
and
year.
17.
Yeah, there's a 13-year and a 17-year this year
Yeah.
that are doing doing their broods. There's ours where I'm at. I don't remember what the other brood is, but there's two broods, which is kind of
There's the
unusual
Brood
for.
X. The Brood X is
Yeah,
what I fashioned that. Basically, it's a popper pattern.
right.
Fashioned it for the Brood X, which happened a couple years ago, and did a little video on that. The video is terrible. I wish I'll probably end up redoing that at some point, but it's a fun fly. It's a cool looking fly.
Yeah.
We don't get the Brood X's as far north as I am, so I never
Hmm.
really had a chance to fish it in a hatch. But I sold a ton
Okay.
of them a couple years ago when we were doing, when it was hatching in other places.
Yeah, well, based on the few minutes I had to read yesterday, you'll probably be selling a lot this year too. But I know I'm going to be ordering some from you here in the next couple weeks, probably. But so I can try and have them tied up before the hatch. But just looking over my notes here, as far as the Cicada X, what
Perfect.
size hook and style hook do you usually use with that one?
That's a pretty big fly. I mean, the Brood X is a pretty big cicada, and
Hmm.
the one that I tie is actually even bigger than the real bug, and which is pretty
Okay.
common, a common thing to do. If you want to stand out in the middle of a hatch, you generally tie your fly a little bigger than the other ones. But mine's on a 3/0 hook, just the same hook as the Zudbubbler,
Okay.
and it uses the double barrel surface seducer popper body.
Okay. And now in the tutorial for that one that I watched, I was going to ask you about when you're putting the eyes in
Hmm.
the foam that you have them sitting in. Is that something that you cut out specifically for those to go in, or is that just one of the end pieces
That's
of like
just
one
one
of
of
the
the
port
end
tiles?
pieces. Yeah, it is made out of the same foam as I make the Zudbubbler bodies out of,
Hmm.
and it was just a way to make, like 20 of them at a time and to
Okay.
glue in all the eyes, because they need to sit horizontal, just so the glue can dry without dripping out. It's
Okay.
just one of those jigs, that comes from a woodworking background that I've brought into fly tying.
Okay. And the last fly that I want to talk with you about, I know I said that was going to be the last one, but I would say this one is, to me, looks like where you really get to show off your artistic abilities, because these flies, I don't know who would fish them if they bought them. I know if I were to buy one, which one of these days I do intend to buy one, order one from you, but your balsa bugs that you make. I mean, they are works of art. And how long does it take you to make one of those from start to finish? I would imagine you make them in batches, but if you were to do one from start to finish.
If I did one from, I mean, even the way I do them now, I might, carve 100 bodies at a time, and put them all on hooks and everything like that. And I still probably average 2 hours per popper. And those,
Okay.
started off as just something I thought would be fun and cool. And I do them in a little acrylic display. And I started off, all of them were hand painted, and so that was a lot of work, but then people
Mhm.
started wanting their logo on it or their college logo and stuff like that, and I'm
Mhm.
like, I can't hand paint something on a 6/0 popper that small and have it look any good anyways. So I started doing design work on my iPad and then sending it to a sign company to print on their basically their vehicle wrap vinyl, the same vinyl they'd use to wrap a vehicle, except we don't use a laminate on it. So it's a very thin material when it doesn't have a laminate over top of it. So
Mhm.
they're printed. I apply them to the balsa popper, and then I epoxy them with 30-minute epoxy. So you end up with a super glassy, glossy finish over top of a very detailed paint job.
Okay. Yeah, because that was the main thing I was curious about, was if you actually hand painted each of those, or if it was the adhesive and then you just epoxied over it.
Yeah, I do still hand paint some of them,
Hmm.
but I can't get nearly as complicated with a paint job as I can with a wrap. So, and they
Okay.
honestly, they both take about the same amount of time,
Hmm.
but they just, you end up with a different product. And they both look
Okay.
really cool when they're finished, but, and that's the purpose. Really, they're just a display fly.
Right.
I sell them for $100 a piece, and surprisingly, once in a while, somebody will send me a picture of one of them in a fish's mouth, but and I fish with them from time to time. If I have one I'm not super happy with, I'll throw it in my box and I'll fish it once in a while. But
Okay.
they're not easy to cast with a fly rod either because they are a 6/0 fly. It's a big fly.
Okay. So all of those that you make are the 6 salt size.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
I used to offer a couple different sizes, and then eventually that would just got to be more confusion than I wanted. So I've
Okay.
tried to simplify my life the older I get, and that's one of the ways I simplified it is just offering one size in that.
Okay. And now, folks that want to try their hand at making balsa bugs,
Mhm.
like myself, you have the stickers. And again, I don't
Yeah.
know if
Okay.
this will be
Yep.
in focus very well or not. This is just part of them that came with what I ordered from you, but you have the templates that will allow folks to actually cut them out the correct size
Right.
without any guesswork, which is very nice, very convenient for folks like me. Because prior to realizing you had these, I was looking, trying to find as many tutorials to figure out the sizes, the angles that I needed to cut them at, as far as tapers, all that. Um, this makes my life a lot easier. But as far as these that you have for sale, what size hooks would be ideal for this particular size bug?
We only offer the templates in the 6/0 size, which are the size
Okay.
of my poppers, and we do that because when I started doing them in wraps versus hand painting, they had to be the exact size and shape for the wrap to
Okay.
fit perfectly on the popper. So we offer the wraps as well. I don't know if you saw those on our website, but
Yeah.
you can buy the templates and then you can buy the wraps that fit that exact size. So if you're making your own
Okay.
balsa bug, want to use one of our wraps, it will fit perfect.
Okay. Yeah, I have seen the wraps, and that was actually something I was going to ask you about was those that you offer. Like if it's more of like just a peel and stick sticker, or if it's more of an actual wrap where you wrap it all the way around the body, and if there's
Right.
any
They
need
are
for like a
actually
heat
just
gun or anything like that.
there's one for each side. So there's one for each side
Okay.
of the popper, and some of them have one for the top as well. So you
Okay.
basically put the sides on first, heat those down, and then put the top on, then and then epoxy it with 30-minute epoxy.
Okay, awesome. And like I say, I'm gonna try my hand at all of these flies, and it's gonna end up like a terrible episode of I can't think of the name of the show now. Nailed It. I don't know if you're
Oh,
familiar
yeah.
with that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've
it's gonna
seen
be
that.
like Nailed It, and so I'm gonna have to show my attempt versus the master's artwork that you've done, but. Going away from fishing a little bit, I've noticed on your Instagram account you have a big interest in birds and bird watching, and
Yeah, I think
I'm
that
a
just naturally happens as you get older, it seems like.
it does, and I know I just spent a good bit of money at Walmart on clearance bird feeders and hummingbird feeders and bird seed for myself here at the house, but um, uh, out of curiosity, because I'm a little bit of a camera nerd and turning into a bird nerd myself, what type of camera do you use? Are you one of those folks that's either Canon or bust, Nikon or bust, or
I have a Canon Rebel T6i right now. It's like 15 years old. I bought it like the first year they came out with. It's not a great camera anymore. It was at the
yeah,
time, but I mean now like they got the Sony Alphas and stuff like that that are super good, cameras. And
oh yeah,
I I get by with it because I have a big lens. I've got the 400 zoom lens, so,
Okay.
and thanks to, like, the AI stuff on Lightroom, I can make a photo that I took in like almost pitch black actually look really good. But if it
Okay.
weren't for some of the developing things, like in Lightroom, my photos
Mhm.
would probably look terrible.
Yeah, I've actually my Christmas gift to myself this year was a Canon T2i. So,
Okay.
I'm going even more old school than you, but I already had Canon film equipment that I knew
Okay.
would work over on it. But, um, what what is the most intriguing thing about the birds with you?
Honestly, I don't think I even noticed birds until I was in my mid 40s. And then all of a sudden, I'm on the river every day, most of the year. And most of the time my clients, I'm parked and my clients are swinging flies for steelhead. And, basically I just have to move the anchor every cast. And so I have a lot of chance to look at nature. And I started noticing how amazing birds were, whether it's eagles or ospreys or even just cardinals or, the tufted titmouse and, all these different birds. And I started really just to become fascinated with birds. And now I'm to the point where, during the summer, I'll chase a single bird around for 30 minutes trying to get a good photo of it. And my wife says, "Yeah, you are definitely getting old."
Now, have you started a life list for birds to kind of check off any particular species or see
Haven't
how you can see?
I haven't gotten that complicated yet. And I'm just a simple guy, and I'm trying to be even more simple as I get older. So I don't know
I
if I'll
got
get to that point from the birding
you.
standpoint
Yeah.
or not, but I do enjoy birds a lot.
Okay. Well, now that we've talked a little bit about nature and the outdoors, let's kind of switch gears and talk about your faith.
Mhm.
Uh, if you don't mind sharing with the audience, just tell us about your faith story, your faith adventure, as I like to put it sometimes.
Yeah. Boy, it definitely has been an adventure. When I was 18 years old, I found myself in the back corner of a youth group event. It was like an overnight event at a hotel. My parents basically made me go to this thing, and I mean, not I was 18. It's not like they could make me go, but they strongly wanted me to go to this. And I didn't I mean, I grew up in, I guess you could say, a Christian home. My mom was a strong believer. My dad had walked away from God for the most part, at that time in my life. He's since come back and is a very godly, amazing man. But at that point in my life, my parents were going through a rough patch. Um, we didn't go to church very much. If we did, it was, a couple times a year, maybe. Most Sunday mornings, I was fishing with my dad out on the lake. But my parents had started going to this new church. And so we basically went with them, and I hated it with a passion. I can't even tell you how much I hated going to this church. And so I would rant and rave the whole way there and the whole way home about how much I hated all these people and they're hypocrites and, just all the stuff. And my parents, God bless them, they just listened and didn't even say anything, negative about it. But they urged me to go to this youth thing. So I sat in the back corner of this room where it was dark, and I kind of looked as mad as I could be so nobody would bug me. And at one point, the youth pastor got up there. His name was Jeff Grinnell. He's still a youth pastor to this day. But he basically was sharing the gospel and sharing, in tears. He was sharing how much God loved us, and he said something to the effect of, "I was back in the corner just praying and asked God to give me a glimpse of how much He loved each one of you." And he's like, "I couldn't handle it," and he's telling us this as he's bawling. And in that moment, I didn't know much about the gospel, honestly. Didn't understand it, anyways. But in that moment, something rang so true in my heart, and I felt God's love for the first time, really, I think ever. And it just melted me. And it's like I got a glimpse of God's love, but I also got a glimpse of God's holiness in that moment and realized really hardcore that I was a sinner and I knew I needed saving. I was in the middle of, I had probably been addicted to pornography for 8 to 10 years at that point. I was full of shame. Nobody knew about my pornography addiction, so it was like this secret sin that if somebody would have found out, I I might have ended up killing myself because it was just so shameful. I was to the point in my life I was writing suicide notes on the back of my homework and handing it in, kind of like a cry for help. And which I did have one teacher that sent me to the guidance counselor because he saw this note, and it ended up being worse than it was less helpful than I think he was hoping it was going to be. But in that moment that I felt God's love and His holiness for the first time, I repented of my sin and accepted Jesus as my Savior, not fully understanding what all of this meant, but it just rang so true in my heart that I knew it was the right thing to do. And I've spent the last 35 years of my life realizing what an important, impactful decision that was. It changed my life forever. That moment changed my life. I mean, for the next day, I was a completely different person. I didn't have shame anymore. I didn't have depression anymore. Now, I still did struggle with the pornography addiction for probably another year until I was just so fed up and disgusted with that sin in my life, where before, there was no way to beat it. It was unbeatable in my eyes. But now, with the help of Jesus in my life, I was able to beat that addiction and found freedom from that.
Okay, well, that's
Basically,
that's
that's how it all started.
well, that's a great story of what Jesus can do,
Yeah,
and God can do in our lives, and I'm just pleased that you're a brother in Christ, and you seem to be one who is willing to go out and share the gospel with others,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
bring
And
others
what's
to
more
Christ.
important in this life, really? There's nothing
Yeah,
more important.
yeah, and now that we've talked about the serious matter, we're going to go into the last segment of the show, and just let folks learn a little bit more about who you are. And it's a segment called "Me Too," and the premise of it is just to ask you a bunch of questions, similar to 20 questions, but there's only about 10, and I have about 6 or 7 that I ask everybody on the show. And then once we've gone through that list, I'll have you pick 3 numbers between 1 and 15, and those will be the other questions that you get. And it's just to see how much listeners have in common with you.
So there are no
And
wrong answers. Is
there
this
are no wrong answers,
oh,
and
phew.
so yeah, the only wrong answer is the one that you don't answer, I guess. But the first one is, what is your favorite Bible story?
You know, I've been watching the Chosen series. I don't know if you're familiar with that. I feel like it's a really well done show. But the last episode I watched, and this was 6 months ago or something like that, so I'm not regularly watching it. But it was where Jesus told Peter he could walk on the water. He said, "Come, if it's you, tell me to come," and he said, "Come." And so, Peter got out of the boat and then started doubting and started sinking. But the way they did that scene, I seriously was crying at the end of that episode. Overall, that particular episode didn't seem that great to me, but
Hmm.
that ending just got me. It's like Jesus realized, how weak we are really in our faith, and that we have to have our eyes on him all the time if we're to live this life victoriously. But that whole story is very impactful to me.
Okay. And I guess the next question is an outdoors related question. Uh, of the any state parks, national parks, or other outdoor related venues that you've ever been to, uh, that and by outdoors, I mean basically if it has to do with creation, with God's creation, it can be considered. I know some folks would probably consider the ark is it because it has to do with creation. But uh, what outdoor related venue has been the favorite that you've ever visited?
I'm honestly quite a homebody. I really enjoy my home river, and I'm not much of a traveler. Although my good friend Derek DeYoung lived in Livingston, Montana for quite a while. He's also an artist, but he lived in Livingston, and so I would go out once a year, pretty much all most of the time he lived there. Anyways, we'd go out in late August or early September and spend a week with him, and man, it is incredible out in Montana. We would go fish, all the rivers out there, but Yellowstone Park was amazing. It was just a totally different scene than I have here in Michigan, but just super epic. Our fishing was most of the time super good, and the friendship and camaraderie was really great. So I would totally do that again.
Okay. And I know being a homebody, as you just said, you might not have any particular place that you've not been to that you would like to see, but what outdoor place would you like to say that you've visited that you haven't been to yet?
I would love to go someplace warm during the winter. I mean, right now we're in the middle of a blizzard up here in Michigan, and
Mm.
I'm glad I'm not guiding today. But I would love to go fish the Keys or someplace like that. And I've never fished anything saltwater, so I have zero
Really?
experience with that. And I would like to do that at some point.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's definitely an experience that would be worth taking up. Um,
Everyone who tells me, or everyone that has been saltwater fishing says you haven't lived until you've caught something out of the saltwater.
Yeah, see, I've got to go out on a boat at some point. That's the
Yeah.
one thing I've not done with the salt water. I've surf fished, but I've never gone out in a boat in the salt.
Okay.
So the next question is, whenever you go out on the lake or any other outdoor adventure, what is a staple that you consider as a must-have for your cooler for a snack?
Hmm. There's like these trail mix things that have, I think they're called like, what is it? Wholesome mix or something like that that I buy at the
Mm.
gas station. It's probably the healthiest food they sell at the gas station. I grab one of those almost every day, and a Verner's. Verner's,
Okay.
probably we've never even heard of Verner's in South Carolina.
No, we actually have them at the
Really?
Ingles, grocery store here.
Okay, perfect. It's just a
I think it's
ginger
Ingles.
ale. Yeah, they
Yep.
call it the Michigan Original, but it's just a really
Okay.
good ginger ale.
Yeah, I think it's Ingles. I know there is one of the grocery stores around here has them.
Gotcha.
Um, what is an item on your outdoor bucket list that you have the most desire to check off?
Hmm. I'd love to go to Alaska. I've never had the opportunity to go to Alaska, and some of our guides, guide all summer in Alaska, but I've always made my guiding during the summer trout and bass here on my home river. But that's one of those trips also that everybody says you have to do. So I would like to do that. That mean I don't really have a lot of things on my bucket list. Or don't really even have a bucket list,
Yeah.
but if I did, Alaska would be on there for sure.
Okay. Now, would it be more of just a sightseeing and exploring trip or more fishing focused?
Probably a little bit of both. I mean, honestly, I'm on the river every day. Not that I'm fishing, but I feel like I'm getting the fishing fix, if you will, by guiding. So I don't have to fish. I still enjoy fishing very much, but I certainly don't have to fish another day in my life to feel fulfilled. So
Okay.
I'll probably do a
And
little bit of sightseeing and maybe photography.
okay. And maybe get a picture of this next question.
Mhm.
And I know you have some artwork that involves this creature, but what term are you going with? Bigfoot or Sasquatch?
Generally Sasquatch, although I sometimes call it Bigfoot.
Okay. Well, now is Sasquatch real?
I'm not a super skeptic on it. I'm not a super believer either, but I think, there's so much unexplored wilderness. I certainly think it's possible that there is something out there like Sasquatch.
Okay. Yeah, and like I said, no right answers, no wrong answers. So
Yeah.
I think this is the one that some folks might be hesitant to answer because they don't want folks thinking they're crazy one way or the other. But as far as an outdoor slang term that either you've used and had to explain to somebody, or somebody's used and had to explain to you, or just a slang term related to the outdoors that you don't think many folks from that aren't from your area would know. What's an outdoor slang term that kind of sticks out in mind to you?
A term I use a lot during the day guiding is the dangle. So the dangle is basically what we call the fly when it's at the end of the swing. And I probably use that term 50 times a day while I'm guiding, because while I'm sliding us back in the boat, we want the
Mm,
fly to remain on the dangle because that's a lot of times when a steelhead bites the fly or a trout.
okay. And then the last question before I let you pick some numbers is, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to already know the answer to this based on the type of guiding that you do. But if you could only own and use one style of rod and reel setup for the rest of your life, what would you choose? Bait cast, spinning, spin cast, or fly?
Obviously, it would be fly, and even more
Yeah.
specific than that, it would be a spey rod. I just
Okay.
love casting a two-handed rod.
Okay. And now it's your turn to pick. So go ahead and give me a number between 1 and 15.
I'd say 7.
7.
Lucky number 7.
All right. What is the most recently used outdoors app? And this can include games on your phone or your tablet. If you even use outdoor related apps on your phone,
Honestly, the outdoor app I use would be either the weather app, because the weather is pretty
right?
important when I'm guiding, or checking the water level, the US Geological Survey website, checking
Okay.
the water level.
All right. Well, give me another number between 1 and 15.
How about 3?
3. What is an outdoor related skill or knowledge that you feel everyone should have or know?
How to build a fire.
Okay.
I'd say without a doubt, that's gotta be the most basic skill you have to know if you're gonna be in the
Yeah.
outdoors.
Right. And one more number and we'll be done.
How about 15?
15. What is your favorite outdoor or adventure book?
Oh gosh. Honestly, most of the books I read are not outdoor related. I have a huge collection of, fishing books, most of them signed by the authors and stuff. And
Mhm.
and honestly, I don't read very many of them. But the guide service that I work for, Feenstra Guide Service, Kevin Feenstra is the owner, and he's written a number or he's written one really popular book, and he's working on another one, and there's lots of magazine articles and things like that. But probably his book is one of the few outdoor books that I've read from cover to cover.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you being on the show and playing along with me too here at the end and sharing your faith adventure.
Happy to.
And but before I let you go,
Mhm.
something that I try to do with my guest when I remember is go ahead and give you the opportunity to let folks know how they can find you be it website, how they can order products from you. And we've already mentioned the website. I'll have a link here in the show description to it. And if they want to hire you out as a guide, how can they go about doing that?
Yeah, so my artwork is offered, like we said, through boneyardflygear.com. And for my guide service, it's feenstraoutdoors.com. So Feenstra is Feenstra, feenstraoutdoors.com.
Okay. And I'll make sure I have a link to both of those here in the show notes. And just one other thing that I just thought about that I meant to ask you earlier, but where did you come up with the name for your company for the Boneyard Fly Gear? What's the backstory on that?
That's kind of a funny story. When I originally started offering decals at some of the fly fishing shows, it was offered under my then guide service website, which was troutguide.com, which I no longer even have that website. But one of my most popular selling decals was my logo now, which is basically a skeleton fish, which was basically drawn after a dead salmon on the side of the river. And so I decided, since that one at the time was my number one selling decal, I was going to make that my logo. So I needed a name that went along with that logo. So that's how Boneyard Fly Gear was born.
Okay. And then, like I said, I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. And but before I let you go, just one last question that I do try to ask everybody. Um, for the audience, what is something in a way that they can support you through prayer? What is a way that folks can pray for you?
Oh man, that's a great question. Um, I really just want God to use me in the state I'm in as a fishing guide. I definitely feel like this is a calling just as much as any other calling. This is what I was born to do in this moment, and I just want it to be used for his glory. And I've had the opportunity on my boat to lead numerous people to Jesus, and it's an amazing feeling, being the one that gets to bring in the harvest from all the seeds that other people planted. But whether I'm planting seeds in people's heart or I get to, lead them to Jesus, I just want to be used by God and to be a good example while I'm out there.
Great. Well,
I
Matt,
appreciate
I can go into. I will definitely add you on my prayer list with that request and be praying for God to use you for his benefit, for his glory.
that. Thank you.
All right.